Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Tabar's 2 Cents, the podcast where we invite the experts to share their story, some challenges that they've seen along the way, and really dig deep and see what sets them apart from the competitors in the industry. Today is very special to me. The guest we have, the expert that we have today, has mastered the niche of the real estate market that I have held very dear to my heart. I've excelled in this niche and hit results that I never even dreamed of hitting. And I've felt like a mini superstar. But then there's Hunter Milborne, coined the Dean of Condos, the man who literally brought the condo to Toronto, the city of Toronto, CEO and president of the Milborne Group, Canada's leading marketer in urban, master planned, and multi-phase communities. Hunter, first and foremost, how are you?
Excellent. Thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So to put this in layman's terms, Hunter Milborne Group approaches or gets approached by developers and lists the entire building. So when your cousin, the realtor at Remax, Royal LePage, Century 21, calls you up and says, hey, I saw a billboard of a pre-construction condo and I want to go into the sales office. When you go into the sales office and you see those salespeople standing there, there's a 25% chance that you're going to be talking to one of Hunter's people. Over 45 years of experience, 800 projects, over 250 developments, over $35 billion in volume, 125,000 units sold. Am I getting this right, Hunter?
Yeah, pretty close. Yeah.
I'll tell you right now, after those numbers, I don't feel much like a superstar. But now let's get right into it. What was the first condo project you ever sold?
Yeah, the first one that we worked on was called Harbor Castle, Harbor Square, 33 Harbor Square. It was a building built on the waterfront in Toronto in the mid-'70s. And at the time, it may sound a little bit silly now, but the waterfront east of Yonge and east and west of Yonge, there was cold storage warehouses, and it was pretty empty. This was really the first building on the waterfront, and it was quite isolated. And plus, the condominium concept was pretty new, so it was tough slugging in the early days there because you were really trying to sell a concept in an industry as well as a product, right?
That was the Mistake on the Lake, right?
Mistake on the Lake, White Elephant. There was a lot of, headlines of old newspaper clippings that I kept, that because the building was actually first built as a rental and it was 540 units. So it wasn't a pre-construction sale that we've gotten into now. So it was 540 suites and it was a rental. And the most I ever rented 2 years after completion was about 175.
Out of the 540?
Out of the 540. So then They converted it to condos, which made everybody even more upset because people who came originally to rent didn't want to be buying, they wanted to rent. And the people who came to buy, they turned them all away at the beginning and said, well, it's not a condo, it's a rental. So it was a tough start. Right?
Well, listen, smooth seas don't make skilled sailors.
That's right. Well, I can also tell you, and it may sound, especially for a younger audience, it may sound a little bit ridiculous today, but the average price per square foot for that building was about $60.
Excuse me?
The average price per square foot that we were selling at was about $60 per square foot.
I heard you. I just couldn't believe that. That's fantastic. 60. And what is it trading for now, would you say?
Yeah, listen, most everything downtown is in the $1,000 to $1,250 range for resales and $1,250 to $1,500 for the new product, So it's up, 20 times, let's say.
Quite a bit. Now, what was the first development, like from start to finish, that you ever worked on? Who's the first developer that you worked with?
Yeah, right after that, there was a project called Market Square, which was at Front and Church.
Yeah.
And it was a joint venture between Olympia, New York and Ronto. And it was about 300 units and it was a mid-rise, 8 stories. It's still a very well sought after product. In those days, the suites were much, much larger. But by this time, the price per square foot had gotten to maybe $125 to $150. So
Wow.
it was still very affordable, but you had suite sizes that are probably 2 to 2.5 times the average today, because as the market's progressed, suites have gotten smaller, but also very much more efficient. So they've been able to keep the affordability.
That's it, keeping the affordability down. We're seeing that in a lot of these new pre-construction condos. You're getting one bedrooms at 420 square feet, just to keep the price point below 500,000.
Right.
Now, I work very closely with Jazz and the RSC guys. And when I got my real estate license 14 years ago, I remember Jazz telling me that there's two types of agents in this industry. And you need to choose which one you want to be like. And there's farmers, and then there's hunters. And we all know which one you are. So I also, 14 years ago, the first thing I did when I got my license was I bought a pre-construction condo. And my mentor at the time was totally against it. No, you overpaid, return it. I was in my 10-day cooling period, and they said, return it and go buy a resale. Needless to say, I didn't do that. And I'm very thankful that I didn't, because the value's probably doubled today. You probably experienced a lot of naysayers in your day, people telling you, why are you focused on this product? Get into luxury real estate, maybe commercial. How did you navigate through those challenges and keep pushing and choose this as the product that you wanted to focus on?
I actually got some good career advice from a friend of my dad's early on in my career. And he said, look, it doesn't really matter what you focus on, but he said, just remember two things. He said, specialize in something and don't be afraid to say no to things, because that'll maintain your specialty. And then once you decide what your specialty is, just decide that you're going to be in the top 5% of your field.
I love that.
And that pretty much goes for anything, and it wasn't really bad advice. I think it was pretty good advice, so.
That's it's a mantra around here. We say stay in your lane, focus on your strengths and do what you're good at. So that's great. Yeah. Now you said the average price per square foot is $1,250 to $1,500. Now, what's caused that to get so high?
Listen, I think that, really, if you take sort of a 30,000 foot view of the GTA condominium market, CMHC, Central Mortgage and Housing Corporation, which is our federal agency that monitors supply and demand of housing, has said repeatedly that the city of Toronto, the GTA, needs 50 to 55,000 new homes per year to stay in a balanced market. And that means that, you're going to have 2 to 4% a year average annual appreciation, right? So for the last 40 years, the average annual rate of appreciation in Toronto has been about 6%.
Right.
In the last 5 years, it's probably been closer to 8 or 10%. But there's periods of time where it goes higher and it goes lower. So you're maybe safer with that long-term average.
Sure.
So the actual supply of new homes in the GTA over the last 10 or 15 or 20 years has been around 40 to 45,000 new homes per year.
We're coming up short.
So every year you have this deficit. And then on a cumulative basis, you've got a big cumulative deficit.
Right.
And if you think of, basic economics, if anybody ever took an economics course, or Economics 100, or even common sense, just says, look, if you have a product that has more demand than supply, then what happens, right?
Prices go up.
Price goes up. So in classic economic terms, that's called a demand pull. So the demand pulls the prices up. The converse of that is a cost push. So if all of a sudden, all the landowners and all the trades, the excavators, the shoring guys, the formwork guy, they see that there's more demand than supply. So there's a cost push side. So if everything gets more expensive every year, then there's a cost push. So
right.
That pushes it from the bottom. So there's two reasons why prices go up. One is because of that demand pull, and two is because of that cost push. So that's really simplifying it. And, there's a study that comes out. It's actually an American cost consulting company. It's called King of Cranes. And basically what it does is it takes the top 15 cities in North America, and on an annual basis counts the cranes based on activity. So Toronto has been first in number of cranes for the last 10 years in a row, but it hasn't been first by 5 or 10%. It's been first by like triple. So in the city of Toronto, there's 127 cranes. In the GTA, it's 246 for last year.
Wow.
And in order to get that number of cranes, you need to take the top 5 American cities: New York, Seattle, Washington, Miami, combined. Like, it's the volume that we have here is pretty significant. The other thing that maybe I think significantly affected the demand over the last 10 or 15 years was the Greenbelt. So in 2005, the province said, look, we can't just keep eating up our farmland with subdivisions. We don't have schools, we don't have police stations, we don't have water, we don't have sewers. You can't keep moving out, commuting times get longer. So they said, look, let's take 1 million acres around Toronto, this golden horseshoe, and we'll freeze it and we'll create the Greenbelt. So prior to 2005, 2/3 of the new homes in the city, and that the actual supply, when we mentioned CMHC, the demand is 50 to 55,000. The supply is 40 to 45,000. So what happened was that the supply before 2005 was 2/3 low-rise, single-family and townhome, and 1/3 high-rise. So by 2015, because what that Greenbelt did effectively was choked off the supply of single-family homes and townhomes, all ground-related products. So the single-family home prices shot up, the condo prices followed, and then by 2015, from an affordability point of view, it was completely reverse. So 2/3 of the new homes sold in 2015 were condominiums, and only 1/3 was low-rise. And every single year, that number of condos sold inches up, and the number of singles sold inches downwards, because of that choking of supply.
Now, I've watched you in other interviews, and you've mentioned that the most expensive real estate in the world is on islands: Singapore, Hong Kong, England, Manhattan. Essentially, this Greenbelt created an island effect.
Exactly. You're quoting a study that was done in 2012 by CIBC. That's where I got that information. And it is common sense, it's common knowledge, but CIBC wrote this report in 2012, and it said that the most expensive real estate was the islands, and it cited those examples, and it said that Greenbelt effectively turned Toronto into an island.
I've heard them use the term Manhattanization of Toronto.
Right.
So now, a lot of this demand, a lot of this 55,000, the need for 55,000 dwellings comes from immigration. Now, the good thing about Canada, the good thing for Toronto, is that when new immigrants come to Canada and they want to find work, there's only really 3 places that they go: Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto. Now, I'm seeing launches happening in Kingston, in Brantford, in Kitchener-Waterloo, in Hamilton. Now, as these smaller towns and smaller cities become more urban, do you think that's going to do something to the $1,250 to $1,500 a foot in Toronto? Or will Toronto always see that 6 to 8% appreciation?
Yeah, listen, I think the old saying, the rising tide raises all boats, and so, if you think of the last 18 months during pandemic, we were absent a lot of immigration. We were absent a lot of students coming. So notwithstanding that, the market was still exceptionally strong. So it shows that, the vast majority, 95 to 97%, are domestic buyers.
Yeah.
And the foreign buyers have been largely absent for the last year and a half. So, it's really a testimony to the resilience of the Toronto market.
So I think that was a misconception too in Toronto, that I don't think foreign buyers ever played a huge role in buying. I think I've heard you say that they only accounted to about 5% in Toronto, and it's more prominent in Vancouver.
Yeah, because of that Pacific Rim base, for sure.
Yeah. So now, I don't know if you watch hockey. Do you watch hockey?
Not too much. I'm busy.
I believe it.
I don't discriminate against hockey. I don't watch too much television.
Have you heard of the Great One?
Oh, of course. Actually, I know Wayne. We've met, and we have a golf course that we're involved with that he used to do a charity tournament on. So I got to know him and his brother Glenn and his dad. when he was alive. So, I know the family,
So, I mean, for those who have been living under a rock and don't know who Wayne Gretzky is, he was the leading scorer in the National Hockey League and still is the leading scorer in the National Hockey League. And they asked him, Wayne, how did you score so many goals? And he said, well, while everybody kind of gravitates to where the puck is, I knew where the puck was going. Now, I like to use this analogy in real estate because, Young and Bloor, University of Dundas, they have the infrastructure. They're not building any more subways around there. The puck is there. Now, in your opinion, where is the puck going? Where are there neighborhoods in the GTA that you see potential for opportunity or for a lot of growth?
Listen, I think that one of the greatest neighborhoods is around Bloor and Dundas, because if you think of something transit-based, I mean, you've got the Yonge and Bloor hub, you've got the Yonge and Sheppard hub, now the new Yonge and Eglinton hub. I guess that's where the puck is now in your analogy. But, people have underestimated the connectivity around Bloor and Dundas, because you have the subway, you have the GO train, you have streetcars, but you also have the Pearson Union Express, which is the airport shuttle. And basically, you can, even if you get on the subway to get to Union Station, it's a fairly long trip, 35, 40 minutes. So you can get on that Pearson Union Express at, there's only 2 stops, one in Weston, one at Bloor and Dundas, and Union and the airport. So you can get on and be 8 or 9 minutes at Union Station. So if you live at Bloor and Dundas, it's almost the same commuting time as if you live at Yonge and Dundas to get to, to get to Union Station. And so that's one of the things. We're doing a project there right now called House of Assembly. Yeah, I know Jazz and his colleagues and Simi we're working on and sold quite a few suites, and it's the first of 3 phases. Because the other saying is, if you want to make money, it's better to buy in a master plan community that's going to have more than one phase.
I heard that.
And I know after the 3 phases, that's Marlin Spring, and then Pemberton has another project across the street on Sterling Avenue, where this House of Assembly is, with another 3 buildings. Hines, the big U.S. developer, just bought a site next door to these projects where they're going to build, I just forget the exact number, but it's 200,000 or 300,000 or 400,000 square feet of office space. So they've figured it out, obviously in advance, that it's going to be a significant new transportation hub.
So you like transit, I guess. It's
and I think the other thing too is that I think the other places that, because one of the things that COVID taught us is that location isn't quite as important. So for some people, so I think the Hamiltons of the world, the Niagara Fallses of the world, we have a big master plan community coming up for sale in Q1 across the street from the GO train station in Niagara Falls. So it's going to be very affordable. It's going to have views of the falls, which is a very appealing feature to have in an apartment condo, and across the street from the GO train.
That's great.
I think you'll see a lot of 905 things, and we're in the middle of 2 project launches this month in Mississauga. One for Edenshaw called Alba, and one for Emblem called Arte. And they're both on that Hurontario Transit LRT line, and they're both doing exceptionally well. The demand there is really outstripping the supply.
And what's the price per square foot that you're selling that at? Average?
They're ranging. It's approximately $1,050.
Okay.
Yeah.
For Mississauga?
And then I guess but even where the puck is, there's still a big demand. Like we have a project we're going to be launching in October for Pemberton, and it's 33 Yorkville. So it's right across the street from the Four Seasons.
Wow. And
it was a project that didn't succeed and was picked up by this Pemberton group, and it's going to be 2 towers, a 76-story and a 55-story building. It'll have a direct indoor access to the Yonge and Bloor subway.
That's amazing.
So that's going to be kind of the alpha project of the year, but it'll probably be on average about $2,000 a square foot. So that's kind of the high watermark. And then as you get further away, prices are going to become a little bit more affordable. But I think that there's still lots of people that want to be at Midtown or want to be downtown, but there's probably a lot more that maybe would like to be somewhere else, but would really be able to afford 905. Because in these 2 Mississauga projects, as an example, or the stuff in Hamilton or Niagara, you're going to find that 75 to 85% of the product is between $500,000 and $700,000.
I find that's the sweet spot.
So that's really affordable for most people. Right?
Yeah, that's usually the product that flies off the shelf anywhere in the GTA. Now, it's funny that you mentioned that, only because I've listened to you so many times. I know that when you launched, when you were selling at $60 a foot down at Harbor Square, um, you were also, there was Hazelton Lanes in Yorkville.
Yeah, so Hazelton Lanes was, there was two projects that we were doing and two other projects that were competition. So on the waterfront, there was Harbor Square and Palace Pier at the time, which is now a two building, but at that time it was just one tower. So those were the $60 a square foot mid-market ones. So the Yorkville ones, the Midtown ones, there was Hazelton Lanes, and there was 150 Heath, was at the corner of Heath and Avenue Road. So they were the luxury ones. They were the expensive ones. They were the $2,000 a foot ones of that day, and they were $100 a foot.
They were $100 a foot. So there's always been a premium to live closer to transit. So transit will always outpace or be more valuable than waterfront.
Well, and it always seems expensive at the time, because there's lots of people that don't make the same decision that you made in terms of that 10-day rescission period, and they'll let Uncle Harry or cousin Cindy talk them out of the decision they just made, because how can that be a good idea,
Right. And how many condos have they bought, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, you kind of listen, people have to, you learn as much from your successes, probably more from your failures, in terms of if you make a mistake and do something, but I had a chat recently with someone and said, well, if you pick the worst day in the last 25 years to buy real estate, if you could isolate the moment in time that it peaked, and if you kept that whatever you bought for 10 or 15 years, you still would have been a big winner.
Still would have been good.
So the main thing I think is to not buy more than you can afford. Don't sell at the wrong time, which kind of interrelate with each other, and just let time work for you.
It's great. It's great advice. Now, I know that you practice what you preach. I know that you invest in a lot of condos yourself. Do you like the one-bedroom condo or the two-bedroom condo more? Do you like to invest in the 416? Do you like to invest in the 905? Please share your insight. Well,
typically, I have a philosophy on that too, is that, if you think of the supply and demand equation within a building, so let's say you have a 400 unit building, and you have bachelors, one bedrooms, 1+10s, 2s, and maybe even some 3s. When those start to resell, in my opinion, the bigger suites, which are the less affordable ones, are typically, in the long run, I think, better investments, just because there's fewer of them. So when you go to, whether it's 3 years from now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now, when you go to resell, you got to think, well, if there's 200 one-bedroom and dens and 152 bedrooms and 53 bedrooms, how many of each type are going to be for sale when I want to sell? So typically what I've done over the years is buy the bigger and more expensive suites, or the suite with a terrace or something with the best view, because on the theory that the better real estate will appreciate faster.
Yeah, and I'm sure it holds true. If you could give the listeners some tips, like I heard you speak about Warren Buffett, and he had 2 rules about investing. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, well, that's when I first heard that. It was quite humorous to me in a way, because here's this guy who's supposed to be the world's best investors, and he has 2 rules of investing, and you'd think, well, gee, there's got to be some strategy, some asset allocation, some philosophy there. But rule number 1 was don't lose your money. And rule number 2 was see rule number 1. So, that's pretty defensive when you think about it, right? So, I mean, the main thing is just don't make a mistake, right? So if you look at the options of, if I have a chance to invest in Uncle Harry's business or Cindy's startup or, the stock market, what are my chances compared to everybody else? If I'm a stock market insider, if I'm a professional, then maybe I can do much better than I would in real estate. But I think for the average person, a real estate investment is really one of the safest bets to make a good return on your equity. And also, if you go back to your original chat there about the resale versus the pre-construction project, with the resale, you're buying, you're closing today, nothing wrong with that. You get a mortgage, you start but now it's time and attention. You're either paying for management or you're doing it yourself. You're renting, the tenant leaves, you got to repay, you got to pay attention. So for 4 years, let's say you've had a lot of activity and it's going to have appreciation, but it's, the reason new cars sell for more than used cars is people like new products. So if you buy a pre-construction condo, for that typically 3, 4, 5 year period, you don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
And also, if the historic annual average appreciation in the GTA is 6%, like even if you use 4%, so let's say you purchase something for $700,000 and your deposit's $100,000. If you've got a compounded 4% return over 4 years, even without compounding, it's a little over $100,000.
You doubled your money.
If your deposit's $100,000, so you've doubled your equity over 4 years, which is basically a 25% annualized return, which any hedge fund operator in the world would die for.
Incredible.
And if it takes 5 years, then it's 20% per year. If it takes 6 years, it's like 17% per year. So it's a pretty compelling argument. It's not risk-free, but it's pretty safe because of our provincial laws. Those deposits are government insured. It's the same as if your money's in the bank.
Yeah,
it's guaranteed. So one of two things happens: you either get what you bought, or you get your money back. So
I just want to touch on one last thing, and again, this is stemming from a talk that I heard you make. Now, I get a lot of first-time investors. I speak to a lot of them on the phone. They've never done this before. They ask me about cash flow and what the rents will be in 4 years from now. And I try to ingrain in their head that pre-construction condo investing is completely different than the landlord business. The cash flow you make on buying a resale condo at today's values and the rents that we're getting from them, if there's even positive cash flow, it's peanuts compared to the passive appreciation you're seeing with even a 4% appreciation per year.
Yeah, I think that, if you just took an example and just say, because you're buying at today's price and closing 4 or 5 years out in a sense at today's price, but now you've got tomorrow's value. So there's that increase in value based on our $700,000 example where your 100,000 turns into 200,000. And for most people, when they do sell it, it's not going to be income, it's going to be a capital gain. So their tax rate would be much lower. But the thing is, let's just assume for an example, depending on whether they took an 80% mortgage or 70% mortgage or, and rates are historical rolls. But let's just say for argument's sake, you've got a $400 a month negative cash flow. By the time you add up your taxes, your common expenses, and your mortgage payment, it's $400 a month. Well, first of all, you probably got $100 or $150 a month that you're paying off your principal.
Yeah.
So, but let's just say for round figures sake that your negative cash flow that's not paying down your mortgage is $300 a month because you can't deduct an expense that if it's a capital cost of paying down principal. But let's say you're losing by $300 a month.
$4K a year.
It's say it's $4,000 a year. Well, that you can write off your current income.
Yeah.
So depending on what tax rate, if you're on a 30% tax bracket or 40% or 50%, do the math on what your actual after tax cost is. And, what you're doing is you're protecting that $200,000 worth of equity. And every year you're probably going to pay more and more principal and you're going to have higher and higher rent. And even though taxes are going to go up and common expenses are going to go up, they're not going to go up as fast as the rent in most cases. So that whether it be 3 years or whether it be 5 years, eventually that becomes a cash flow positive situation. But you've protected that asset value based on that negative cash flow, call it. And it's not like depreciation, so you never have to pay that back because it's basically an expense, right?
And you just refinance and avoid the taxes.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to touch on one last thing. You did mention that the location in pre-construction condos is important, but timing is also important. Now, when would you say is the best time to buy a pre-construction condo?
Whenever you're ready. In terms of there's not to be tried on, but there's the seasonality of it. I mean, we have 3 launches this month, so it's July, which in the summer is supposed to be, it's almost 1,000 units, and they're all going to sell very well. Whether it's spring, summer, winter, or fall, or whether it's, whether you're 25 or 35 or 45, is, whenever you have the ability to buy something, I think that's the time. And I think the key thing, back to our Warren Buffett theory, is that, what I always tell people is just the corollaries for that, for me, were always to say, don't buy more than you can afford and don't sell at the wrong time. Because if people get caught up and they're reluctant to do it because it's a new experience. So I would encourage people to go shop, new home sites and learn as much as they can about it, so that when they do find an opportunity, they're not afraid to pull the trigger and buy something. But then they get hooked and say, well, gee, this is a really amazing way to build equity and create wealth. So if 1 is good, then 2 is better, and then 4 is even better than that, and 8. So then if you get into a really, really highly leveraged situation and you're buying too much, and any little hiccup in the economy or in your personal life, and then you have to sell something at a not good time, that's a problem. So it's better to kind of be a little bit more conservative and, follow kind of a get rich slow program as opposed to a get rich quick program. Right?
I have no problem with getting rich slow. What I meant was, many people have this misconception that buying at the launch is the only time you should buy. Now, I know this was 8 years ago, and it was with the Condo Academy. It was an interview that you had, and you said that when developers are about 15 or 20 units away from getting construction financing, they often offer some really, really good incentives that actually make the investment much more attractive than somebody who had bought at the launch. Do you think that still holds true in today's market?
Yeah, that we have actually a situation that's probably more like 20 to 30 units that they need to have sold because they want to start this fall. It's a project at 4696 Kingston Road called Perch Condos by one of the H&R group of companies. So it's, very strong sponsorship, and they have Ciccone Simone as a interior designer. Amazing. And it's really almost designed as a downtown building, but with a more suburban suite mix. But, we still have probably 25 suites there that are less than $650,000 that are available, but they do have some promotions on right now to try to, get those 20 or 30 sales, in the next 30 days as opposed to the next 120 days, because they want to keep on their schedule. So it still happens. It does.
I saw that promotion come out.
Yeah.
Hunter, I really, really want to thank you. Thank you for so much for giving me the time. I know you're a busy guy. You have launches all over the place. The market's insanely hot. Just to touch on some of the things you said and give Tabar's 2 cents here. Stay in your lane. Only buy what you can afford. Don't sell at the wrong time. Did I leave anything out?
No, I think that, I enjoy doing this because it's nice to chat about something that you know a little bit about, and give some advice to people that are starting out. But I truly believe that, we're very blessed to be in Toronto, because not just because it's such a great real estate market, because it's so multicultural, it's so ethnically diverse. We've got a lot of European mayors that come and visit the city and say, how do you guys do it here? Everybody gets along, everything's so nice. And, even though the last year and a half was very challenging with our lockdowns and everything, is I think that, the market here is really, really set to keep expanding. And I think, one of the reasons too, is that the world, even though we don't have a lot of foreign buyers, but, when people immigrate, the world still really thinks and functions in US dollars. So if you think, all right, $1,050 a square foot in Mississauga, if you grew up in Mississauga, it sounds like a lot of money. But, if you just came from India or from wherever, and you have a little bit of US dollars, that's, 700 to 750 US. So it's not so crazy based on a world-class city, right?
Love that. Yeah. And just so we can tell the people, in the city of Manhattan right now, what's the average price per square foot in US dollars?
Yeah, probably about 2,500.
And which is Canadian, we're looking at?
Well, 25 to 30% more, depending on what day you're at, right?
Yeah, so you're about $3,000 Canadian a month.
A foot, yeah.
That's amazing. A foot, that's what I meant. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Hunter, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you at your next launch. And again, I really appreciate the time you gave us today. It was really, really insightful.
Anytime. Love to do it again and whenever you want. Take care.
Thank you, Hunter.
Thanks a lot.